All right, hello class. So here we go again. We've talked a little bit about this last week, the area of similar figures, and I'm just going to try to remind you a little bit about how we do this. These questions on this worksheet that I've made up are not like the ones that you have. So these are similar, so you can't just copy these down. You got to apply the concept. So you might recall to find a missing side length, which is what we're going to do first. You just do what we did earlier in the year, just a few weeks back, and we match up some stuff that's missing. So this 14 matches up with that unknown, we'll call it x, and then it's equal to another fraction of some side. So this 12 over here doesn't have anything to match up with, but this 12 right here does have something to match up. Maybe choose a different color. This green matches up with that one, so 12 over 6. Okay, and then we talked about how you can cross multiply. You also could just remember that this is just a fraction that's the same as the other fraction over here. So 12 over 6 you might know simplifies to 2 over 1. 14 over x would also simplify to 2 over 1 if x was 7. But maybe you didn't know that and you didn't recognize it or something. We can still just cross multiply and solve for this. So 14 times 6 would equal whatever 12 times x is, 12 times x. So 14 times 6, I just punch it in the calculator, 14 times 6, let's see what that is, 84, and 84 will be equal to 12x, and that means that when I divide by 12 that x is going to be 7. Okay, so this missing side right here would be 7. Now, how do I use this information to figure out the side, or the area, excuse me. So remember that the sides ratio, when you square it, is equal to the area ratio. So I pick one of these sides fractions, either like the 14 over the x, or 14 over 7 is what it is now. Erase all that stuff. Or I can use a simplified version. So I've got 12 over 6 right here. I can use 12 over 6. I can use 14 over 7. I can use a simplified version, which is 2 over 1. And that's the one I'm going to go with just because it's smaller numbers. Why not? And then we're going to write a fraction for the area ratio. Area is 100, and put that over the unknown a. Now I got to square before I cross multiply. So when I square 2 over 1, that's 2 times 2 and 1 times 1. 2 times 2 is 4, 1 times 1 is 1. And then I've got this fraction, just bring it down. And then you're going to cross multiply just like you've been doing. So 4 times a is 4a. And I'm going to write it over here, run out a little bit of space, 4a. And then 1 times 100 is 100. And then divide by your 4. And so a should be 25. Remember, this is area, so area is measured in meters squared in this question. So there's your answer for that question. 25 meters squared. Key thing here is when you find the sides ratio, make sure you square it. Now, that's a bunch of scribbles, so hopefully that's not too confusing. We're going to try another one. It's almost the same idea, just a different shape, different numbers. So we're going to start by trying to find the missing side length. And that's just what we used to do on the old stuff. So we got to match up some sides. 35 matches up with 21. I should be saying corresponding. That's the real math word. And then I see that 40 is going to match up with this unknown. I'm going to call that x. So 40 matches up with x. This 35 over here is useless because it doesn't match up with anything. So that doesn't help me. I'm not going to use that one. Okay, obviously that 35 is the same as that 35, but this one is the same as that one. But if it was a different number, you wouldn't use it because there's nothing there. Okay, so we got 35 over 21 equals 40 over x. We're going to cross multiply. And by the way, you can simplify at any point. Anytime you see a fraction that you could simplify, you could. So maybe you recognize that 35 over 21 simplifies, and you go ahead and do it now. Or maybe you don't. You just cross multiply 35 times x and 40 times 21. Okay, that's what I did last time. Now, this time I'm going to go ahead and simplify. 35 and 21, they simplify. Okay, they're exact same thing. 35 and 21 is the same as 5 over 3 because 7 goes into both of those numbers. 7 goes into 35 5 times, and 7 goes into 21 3 times. Now I'm going to put that equal to 40 over x, and then I will cross multiply. I get 5x equals, I'll cross multiply this way, that's 120. Take the 5 and divide it on both sides. Okay, and see what you get. I believe that's going to be 60. No, that's not right. Maybe it is. That's not 60. 120 divided by 5 is 24. I don't know where I got 60 from. So this answer is 24. This is just the side length right there. This unknown is 24. This is regular units. That should be centimeters. Now I take one of those fractions, either this thing right here or the simplified version of it, and that is my ratio for the sides. That's a sides ratio. And then I'm going to take that and square it. So let's write 35 over 21. You could use this version and square it and put it equal to the fraction for the area, the ratio for the area. The area is unknown on the top, this thing, over 900. Or if you wanted to, you could use a simplified version of this, which we decided was 5 over 3. Either set would work. Now, I'm going to use the 5 over 3 because it's smaller numbers. Maybe it makes my math a little bit easier for me. 5 squared is 25. 3 squared is 9. And then I have a over 900 on this side. I will cross multiply and try to figure out a. If you look at this, you might be able to figure out that, hey, I had to times 9 by 100 to get 900. So 25 times 100 will be my answer. But maybe you didn't recognize that. Maybe that wasn't clear to you. And you can cross multiply 25 times 900. Punch it in my calculator. 25 times 900. Oops, messed up somewhere. 900 equals 22,500. 22,500. Oops, I don't know why I did that like that, but whatever. And this is 9a. I'm going to divide by 9 on both sides. And it means my answer is 2,500. Okay? So a is 2,500 like I told you it was going to be. Our unit should be centimeters squared. Okay, so that's the answer for the second question. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Now we're going to do the same idea this time, but down here at the bottom, our goal is to find the missing side when I only have one side, so I can't set up two fractions like I did up here in this section. I've only got one fraction possible on the shapes, the x over 40. Okay, but I do have some area information already told to me. Like up here, I didn't have two areas, I only had one area. So I can make a fraction out of my sides. And as I told you before, you will make a ratio to square that. To square that sides ratio and put it equal to the areas ratio. So the square of x over 40 should be equal to the areas ratio, 450 over 800. Okay, so if I square this, I get x squared. I get, if you square 40, you're going to get 1600. Double check me if you want to. Put it in a calculator, make sure you see where that number comes from. Okay, now I can cross multiply. I can cross multiply this thing, I'll get 800x squared, and then cross multiply this thing. It's going to be some really big number. Okay, I don't know what it is. Punch the calculator, figure out what it is. But to save myself a little bit of trouble, I could simplify this fraction 450. This thing 450 over 800. That'll simplify down to something. At least I know it'll simplify to 45 over 80 because 10 goes into both of those. Okay, then I know 5 can go in both of these and try to figure out how much. Okay, but I could simplify that fraction and make my work a little bit easier. So when I simplify this, it ends up being 9 over 16. Okay, so this becomes 45 over 80, which is 9 over 16, or just jump 9 over 16 if you can figure that out. Okay, so let me move my work a little bit over here. So I got x squared equals 1600. I simplified this fraction here, and I got 9 over 16. You might be able to see where this is going, but if you aren't, we're going to cross multiply. And this is 16x squared equals whatever 9 times 1600 is. Okay, and I'm going to note that before I do this, at this point, there might be another way to tackle this. It's going to be a little bit easier, but we'll come back to that in a second. And when I cross multiply this way, I got 14,400. And I'll divide that 14,400 by 16. I think this fancy program would do it a different way. Let me see. 14,400 divided by 16 gives me, oh, it didn't do it. I thought it would. Maybe if I put equals. Equals? Oh, it does. 900. Okay, so I'll go ahead and delete that. This ends up being, when I divide it by 16 on both sides, x squared equals 900. And then you take the square root of that on both sides. That makes the square go away. The square root of 900 ends up being 30. Okay, the answer is 30. Remember, this is area. I'm sorry, this is a side right here, 30. We were talking about inches squared for the area, so this has got to be regular inches, 30 inches. Okay, so let me go a step back now. I know this video is starting to get a little bit long, but I want to go back to right here. And you could do this a couple of different ways. Now, maybe you made it to all this work in this part. It's starting to make sense where you got the x squared over 1600 equals 9 over 16. If we square rooted this right there, I do it on one side, I got to do it on the other side. What ends up happening is the square root of x squared is just regular x. Square root of 1600 is 40. I got to square the other side too. That's going to be 3, and this is going to be 4. And maybe you can see the answer right here. If I just multiply this denominator by 10, then that's how I got the 40. Or if I do this one by 10, then I'm going to get 30. Okay, maybe that doesn't make sense to you. Then you can cross multiply and you will eventually get that the answer is 30. Okay, and now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do it a completely different way. So give me a second. Let me pause and clear this off. Okay, now we've set up this fraction where we did our sides ratio and we squared it. At this point, we don't know that this is 30. Another way we can tackle this is, instead of going in and square this, we can square root it at the very beginning. And square rooting cancels out the square, so this just ends up being x over 40. If I square root one side, I got to square root the other side. Now, if you punch this in your calculator, one of those yellow calculators in my classroom, use the big square root button, use n over d, 450 over 800, you'll end up seeing 9 over 16. Actually, I take that back. It's the square root of 9 over 16. If I simplified that, then after I actually square root it, it'll be 3 over 4. Excuse me. Okay, so if you choose not to square it, instead, your very first step is to square root to get that x by itself. Then you can cross multiply right here, and you'll eventually figure out that x is 30. Okay, now if that doesn't make sense, go back to the first way we did. I'll show you all this a second time. Okay, here's another question. Okay, so let's set it up. First, we always start with the sides. We know that this is unknown. X matches up with 25 or corresponds with 25. We got to square the sides ratio. That's the most important part of this entire lesson. Square the sides ratio to put it equal to the area ratio. First area is 180 over the second one, which is 125. So on all these fractions, I'm doing left over right. It's just because that's the way I read. Whatever order you go, make sure you put the area in the same order. Okay, now right here, I could square root at the very beginning to get rid of this x squared. If I square root this left side, then I got to square root the right side. Okay, maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you just want to keep with the pattern we were doing with the very first two questions and square both of these, which makes, I think that's 625 going off of memory. Maybe I should check that. Okay, yes, I did check it as 625. So I squared that side. Now I got to put that equal to the areas ratio. And as I said before, you could simplify that fraction, this 180 over 125. Anytime you can simplify a fraction, you should. And if you didn't, it's okay. You could take the 125 times the x squared. You're just going to get a really big number, and you get an even bigger number with 180 times 625. And that's all right. Your work is still going to be the same idea. It's just going to have bigger numbers. Me, on the other hand, I'm going to go ahead and simplify this fraction and come up with its equivalent. Its equivalent ends up being 36 over 25. So I've got an x squared over 625 equals 36 over 25. And you could square root here at this point if you wanted to. And you might see that that'll make your work a little bit easier and make this a regular x. Square root this, you'll be back to 25. Okay, and so then you'll see that these two, this will be a 6 over 5. And maybe you can figure that out. But once again, if that doesn't make sense, what we'll do is just continue like we're doing. 25 times x squared is 25x squared. It is equal to the other direction, 36 times 625. Okay, you punched out a calculator and see what the answer is. It shows me that my answer is 22,500 right there. Okay, so now I've got 25x squared equal 22,500, and I'm going to divide by 25 on both sides. You'll get x squared all by itself. 22,500 divided by 25 equals 900. And then you take the square root on both sides, which will make this answer 30. Okay, so there you go, 30. That's your side length. Okay, so hopefully that makes some kind of sense to you guys. As I said, there's lots of ways to go about solving the algebra. Just watch this video a few times. It probably won't make a bunch of sense. And honestly, I don't know if I did a great job explaining it, but hopefully that makes some kind of sense for you. Send me some emails if you got questions. I hope that helped out a lot. And good luck. Finish up your worksheet. Oh, by the way, the first two questions were the whole front of the worksheet, basically. So maybe you watch the first two. Again, pause it, finish up that side of the worksheet, then go to the back side, watch the last two again, and pause it. Go back and watch again, however many times you need. All right, bye.